If you're tired of feeling overwhelmed and confused about when it comes to nutrition, feeling like you need a PhD just to decipher what the information you're seeing online is, then today we're here to break down exactly what nutrition is. We're going to talk about what your healthy diet should look like, what protein levels or what kind you want to look for in protein. We're going to break down what fruits and vegetables are good versus what you should try to avoid versus how that fits into your diet. We're also going to talk about carbs and where those come in. Those kind of get a bad rap sometimes. And then we're going to finish it off with talking about fats and how that can play into your diet and should you avoid them completely or should they be a part of it. So, Austin?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this. We're just going to try and demystify general nutrition a little bit, make it easy for you guys to understand the basics, give you some quick tips. That way, when you go to the grocery store or when you're shopping or cooking, you got a good idea about what to do and if you're doing it right. There's a lot of fad diets out there that get very complex and confusing. Usually, none of them work. So, we're just going to talk about general nutritional advice to keep you guys healthy.
Yeah. So, what's one of the first things that patients come into your office asking you about when it comes to nutrition?
It kind of depends. If they've tried a crash or a fad diet, usually it's, hey, I've lost 10 pounds and I feel awesome and I'm so excited because I'm doing uh, keto or some other weight loss program or something like that. And they're really excited about it. And then usually 6, 8 weeks, maybe 2 months later, and they're like, hey, doc, remember how I told you I lost 10 or 15 pounds? Now it's, oh, I've gained 20. And it has to do with just compliance to those strict diets. They just can't stick with it. Or they'll ask me questions about like, what do you consider a healthy diet, and what are the key components of that?
So, when it does come to a healthy diet, one of the first things that I always try to talk to patients about is how do you want to look at your plate? So, first off, general rule of thumb, you want about half of your plate to be fruits and vegetables, the other half your protein and everything else. So what that can look like is just splitting it all up. When it comes to protein specifically, we're talking about the size of your palm is usually what you're looking for, somewhere in there, mixed with then the rest fruits and vegetables. What kind of protein would you say would be the best source if the people are looking to get started increasing that in their diet, Austin?
Yeah, so protein's kind of a mystified thing, but we're going to demystify it. So if you're sticking with like a specific diet for some reason, if you have some ethical concerns for vegan or vegetarian, it gets a lot more complex. You have to look about synergistic bioavailability, which is a big term that basically says if rice has a little bit of protein content, beans has a little bit of protein content, or legumes, you have to combine them to be able to get good bioavailability versus like a standard animal protein usually absorbs a little bit better into our system. We digest them a little bit better. So like your gold standard is like an egg, right? Like the egg is like the perfect protein source. But red meat's great because it gives you some iron. Chicken's good. Fish is amazing because it balances out your fat portfolio. I recommend people kind of get a variety of these things. I usually say fish at least once a week. That has to do with fats, which we'll get into later. But yeah, that portionment, like palm size is usually pretty good, and based on your size, usually it's decent for people's body weight too. Like a smaller person will have a smaller palm. Densities can be a little bit different depending on the type of protein, but we don't need to go that deep. Just kind of stick with generally you want to get a good protein source. Try and keep it clean. Doesn't need to be breaded or fried or anything like that. Just lean meats are usually what I tell people to go for. If you want to go for a nice fatty meat, then that's good for your fat profile, but we'll talk about that later.
And another thing to keep in mind when it comes to protein, you generally want to shoot for about 1 gram of protein per pound of body fat, or per body weight, sorry. And for most people, aiming for around 80 to 100 grams of protein a day is probably going to be a pretty good number to start with. And if you're not hitting that in what you're consuming through just the food you eat, then there are other things you can look at, whether that's protein powders or the different protein bars and snacks. But then you really got to be careful as to what you're seeing as ingredients in there, because some of the protein snacks, like if I'm walking through the gas station, they're starting to label all these little bars with protein, and some of them can be okay. Some of them are just loaded with a bunch of other junk in there as well, with a little bit of protein added in just to call it to meet that standard, to hit that spot in the aisle, really. So really just I prefer to If you can get all the protein that you need through just eating it, that's going to be your best source, because then, like Austin was saying, the bioavailability, your body's going to be able to use that more, versus if you're taking all these powders. It's great just to help get you to that extra spot, but it's not going to be a great source to completely replace it. What is your opinion on plant protein when it comes to that, the different protein powders there?
Yeah, so as far as like protein powders go, whey's always been sort of gold standard. That's always obviously the protein that they spin out of like casein, milk, and that kind of stuff. That comes from the dairy industry, but there's different sources. Obviously, as far as the plant proteins go, I think peas are usually a better like powder. If you can find a plant protein that has pea protein, it's usually a little bit better because it comes from a legume. It's hard to get it directly from the plants at the amount that you need unless you're eating a lot, and that has to do with fiber content. So if you are on a vegetarian or vegan diet, just know that if you're eating raw foods and vegetables and things like that, then the fiber is actually going to bind to the protein, and you're going to lose some of that bioavailability of the protein. So the quantity that you have to eat might be a little bit higher. So if you are supplementing with a powder and you don't have an ethical concern with whey, I think whey is better. If you want to stick with vegan or vegetarian, pea protein's pretty better. I usually tell people to try and avoid soy. That just has a lot to do with hormones, which we don't need to go too deep into that, specifically more for men, but that's my general rule of thumb. Women, it's not as big of an issue. Too much soy for anybody can kind of cause some estrogen and estradiol changes. So I usually tell vegetarians and vegans to stick with pea proteins if they can.
And just to be clear, eating it here and there in your diet is not going to cause a big problem. Like, for example, if you're eating tofu, if you're eating
Oh
tempeh,
yeah, you
that
get there.
once or twice a week, you're not going to notice any changes. It's when that's all you're living on, that's when you got to be a little more careful. So you talked about fiber. That makes us, I mean, we might as well just segue right into the next portion, talking about fruits and vegetables, which is where you're going to get the bulk of that fiber. And the bulk of that fiber is going to come from the actual skin. So you don't want to always peel everything down to nothing before you eat it. Eating the raw vegetables with the skin on, that's where a lot of the nutrients are. And that's one of the main reasons that you want to eat the fruits and vegetables in the first place, is because they are so nutrient dense.
Yeah. That's a big part of it. The other thing is like in fruit in particular, we have a habit of over processing fruit for, like juices and things like that. Fruits and vegetables hold a lot of fiber, vitamins, antioxidants, phytonutrients, all the good stuff that we want in our diet, and that we need to have. We have a habit of over processing these things, jams, jellies for strawberries, orange juice is one that we were talking about right before
But they
we came
taste so
on.
good.
Yeah, I know they taste great, but you're just getting a ton of fruit sugar without the fiber. And there's nothing wrong with fruit sugar because naturally, anthropologically, as humans, we would get fruit about once a year. Now we have year-round harvests with global trade. So it's not really, it's a good source for these vitamins and minerals, but it's not supernatural to have an overabundance of it, especially when it's processed like that. We get way too much sugar at a given amount of time. Like we were talking earlier about just off camera about orange juice, and I was saying, some people will say, even if you look up like the Diabetic Society, like what should you have in the morning for breakfast? It says like oats and orange juice. Okay, so one, 8 to 12 ounce glass of orange juice is 8 to 12 oranges. 4 oranges
Yep.
gives you like 2 to 4 ounces. So I mean, at what point would you sit down in a sitting and eat 8 to 10 oranges? I mean, we're talking big oranges. That's a
Yeah.
lot of sugar. And when you just do the juice, you don't get the fiber. So you're consuming all of the sugar. Now, if you had the fiber, some of the sugar would bind to the fiber and you wouldn't absorb it the same way.
Yep.
So,
And there, when it does, talking about the sugar content in fruit, like Austin was saying, drinking, and when you consume any of the fruit via beverage or drink or juice, that is going to definitely have a much higher concentration of the sugar. If you're just eating handfuls of fruits and like strawberries, blueberries, whatever for a snack in between meals or with your lunch, then you're still not going to see that giant jump in blood sugar spike. You're going to see some, but it's not like if you were to grab a candy bar or a bag of potato chips. It's still not the same type of sugar. Going back to that nutrient quality, you want to have good quality nutrients in the food that you're eating. So I want to talk next about what you should look for when you're buying fruit in the grocery store. So there's two things that they call the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen, this They've done studies to find out how much pesticides are residuals stays on the casing or the skin of the fruit. And apples, peaches, nectarines, grapes, these are all going to be ones that you want to avoid in terms of they're going to have a lot of pesticide residue. That's what they call the dirty dozen. Strawberries, grapes, peppers, jumping into some of the vegetables there, cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, snap peas, potatoes, hot peppers, all of that is in that dirty dozen. Now on the flip side, they've also looked at which fruits and vegetables are the cleanest when it comes to that. That's what they call the clean 15. That's avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, onions, papaya, sweet peas, frozen, asparagus, honeydew, melon, kiwi, cabbage, watermelon, mushrooms, mangoes, sweet potatoes, and carrots are all in that clean 15. So if you're really, and no matter what, when you're buying vegetables or fruit in the store, always try to clean it. Give it a good little rinse. I don't know. I usually just do water. I know some people will do water with, I think it's baking soda to help kind of get some of that extra junk off. Don't quote me on that. You might want to double check what it is that they're using.
Yeah, some people do like a white vinegar rinse too. I don't think you have to go that in depth, but definitely rinse your fruits and vegetables off. Just if there is, especially if they're in like the dirty dozen, apples, things like that, just give them a quick rinse. Most of the stuff will come off with water or, give it a little rub down if you need to kind of get some of the, if it feels like grainy, feel little granulars on it, make sure you kind of wipe it off with the water as well. But definitely the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15, those are published and updated every single year. Keep an eye on those if you're really interested in pesticide contents in your food. But yeah, wash things off. Some of these say even like things like they'll say pre-washed lettuce, things like that. Always re-rinse. A lot of these things are going through factory lines. They're sprayed down. They're chucked into a bin and sealed. They literally just run water over it to say it's pre-rinsed. It's not usually a very good clean job. So you want to make sure that you wash these things down a little bit to get not only residual pesticide off of them, but dirt and grime. And, these things aren't exactly the cleanest when they're being transported.
Who knows how many people have picked it up before you
Yeah.
decided you wanted to buy it.
Yeah. And I mean, they use like, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but they actually use bananas because they release, I believe it's ethyl gas, and that helps to ripen fruits in the stores. So that's not that that's really going to hurt the items, but that ethyl gas is what ripens it up for the store. Because usually things are picked pre-harvest for grocery stores just so they're at a time of service to be able to be eaten. Because if they picked it ripe, then by the time it got to your store, especially if you're not near where these things are grown, they would go bad. So just kind of rinsing that stuff off.
Yeah. Do you want to kind of jump into fats next?
Yeah. So you want me to start on that?
Yeah, I'll talk about it here.
Okay.
So, fats have been something that's been demonized for decades now. They tell you don't eat any fats, low fats, but when it does come to fat, again, just like everything else, quality and quantity definitely comes into play. Your body uses fat to burn energy, especially in the brain. That's where you see a lot of that. So you don't want to, again, just like all of it, you don't want to cut it out completely, but there is moderation. And then when it does come to fats, there's a few like top tier ones you want to look for, whether that's the omega-3s, your omega-6s. Those are both going to be really helpful in fighting cardiovascular issues. And then you can stick with when we're cooking, avocado oils, coconut oils. Those are both really good ones to use. Those are full of, I believe it's monounsaturated fats, and that's going to be one of the best ones you can cook with.
So yeah, and that just has to do with the bonding. Coconut oil is actually a saturated fat, similar to butter, but they're both fine. It's just the way in which the bonds are oriented and how you cook. Also, the heat at which you cook oils is different. I tell people to avoid rapeseed and canola oil as well as vegetable oil. Try and cook with coconut oil, avocado oil, or olive oil. And if you're going to cook at high heat with olive oil, make sure it's a high heat olive oil. There actually are different types of olive oils. And Dale touched on the different types of fats a little bit. There's omega-3, omega mono unsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated, and trans fats. Trans fats are unnatural fats. They pretty much eliminated them for most things. It was a big thing in the 90s. That's like margarine is like a good example. It's these synthetic type fats that they created. And the reason why fats got a bad name was back in the 60s, the sugar industry paid a boatload of money to some Harvard researchers basically to cherry pick data saying that Fats led to cardiovascular disease, and sugars did not have as much of an impact. It turns out sugars have a higher impact on cardiovascular disease than fats. So if you're worried about like heart health, your sugar is going to hurt you more than the fat. That's been pretty much well established now, but it's been 60 years of it being indoctrinated into the society that
Yeah.
fats are bad.
Yeah, and with the fats too, just to finish off here, it's not something you need to cut off. Like I see a lot of people at restaurants, they'll cut the fat off the meat. Those are actually still very good for you and not something you want to be avoiding. Like I said, your body can turn fat into energy, so you definitely want to be giving yourself that extra fuel. And that's what you see some of these diets talking about with keto and these low fat diets is getting into ketosis so that your body actually breaks down the fat and converts that back into energy. And then that's how you see such rapid weight loss when you jump on these diets, because you're forcing your body to rely solely on your own body fat for that, which is okay for short term, but it's not something you want to continue long term, which kind of takes us into our final little stop here, which is talking about carbs. I'll let you jump off starting here.
Okay, so carbs, they get a bad rap too. They're not bad. They're fine. They're the primary energy source for 90% of your body. Carbohydrates are just basically a simple bond that we break down and we absorb through a lot of different types of foods. And people are always looking for, I want low carb or zero carb. Well, the reason why people on fad diets do great cutting out carbs is because usually they're cutting out what are called simple carbohydrates. And those are things like breads, white breads, sugars, that kind of stuff. So what are you cutting out when you cut out carbs? Well, usually you're cutting out pizza, fast food, you're cutting out breads, you're cutting out these simple carbohydrates. Carbs aren't the enemy, guys. It's the simple carbohydrates. If you go to a more complex carbohydrate with like a fiber structure, you're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about cutting carbs. It's just the quantity in which you eat it and what you're eating is what you should be more focused on. It's
Yeah.
not carbs in general. Dr. Wesley, I'll let you kind of take over and talk a little bit about
Yeah.
carbs and
So
performance and
when it comes to carbs, I mean, if anyone's been an athlete, you hear load up on carbs before a race, load up on carbs before you go compete, and that's because your body that's your first source of energy when your body's going to break it down. So it comes from the extra, it's going to convert the carb into a sugar and then back into energy there. So it's definitely vital in terms of your body's function. And then if it's not there, then secondary, it goes back to what we were just talking about, which would be the fat. So you're one way or another, your body's going to be utilizing carbs. Now, when it comes to the reason it's so demonized or stay on low carbs, my opinion is because here in America, we see how many people are on diabetes or diabetics. And the number one thing they tell you, avoid carbs. That's what's causing it. And yes, to a degree, but like Austin said, it's more those simple carbs. If you are eating the complex carbohydrates, chances are you're not going to have diabetes, or it's not going to be something you're struggling with. Not going to say it can't happen, but it's the excessive eating of the simple carbs, the snacks, the pizzas, the breads, and especially the white breads or different things like that. That's really where you're going to see that carb spike and really cause the blood sugar problem. So if you can eliminate it, again, we keep talking about the nutrient quality in the food you eat. It's not always about elimination. It's just about finding the best nutrients to fuel your body for the long haul.
yeah, so just kind of a simple sort of recap. These will be some basic tips for you guys to use when you're grocery shopping on how to keep a healthy diet. Number one, most grocery stores are usually have the processed food in the middle because they don't require power to keep cool. So shop on the outsides of a grocery store. If you do that, you're more likely to be around the fresher foods because they require refrigeration. You'll have your fruits and vegetables in the front. That's a great place to start. Meats, I prefer unprocessed meats. I try and avoid deli meats. It's a whole nother topic of conversation, but your meats and your cheeses, fresher the better. I kind of avoid the center of the grocery store at all costs unless I'm getting some kind of legume or bean. And then your dairy and all that's okay. Color is important as well. It sounds funny, but a lot of times different colors on fruits and vegetables will indicate their nutritional content to us. Like a great example is a red bell pepper. There's a reason why we like red bell peppers. They have the highest vitamin C content, even higher than an orange. So varieties of colors in food is great to have if you can. Avoid grains as much as you can. I mean, you can get some, but again, outside the grocery store is your best bet. Avoid the middle. If there is something in the middle you have to grab, my general rule of thumb is when you're looking at the ingredient label, if the ingredient label is longer than the width of your pinky, That's probably too many ingredients for you. So
Yep.
try and find something simpler or with less ingredients in the packaging. Dale, do you have any other tips or tricks when you're grocery shopping?
You kind of nailed most of them there with, like you said, shopping the edges, making sure reading the nutrient labels, reading the nutrition labels. The last thing I kind of want to leave off here with is over the next 6 weeks, we're going to be jumping into a deeper dive on each of the sections that we just talked about. And if you are interested in learning more, you can sign up in the link down below to the newsletter, and it's going to go directly to your inbox every Monday over the next 6 weeks. We're going to break down more deep dive on how protein's affecting the body, what you should be looking for, and same thing with each of those little sections that we kind of just touched on today. So we're going to be jumping a lot more into that if you're looking forward for more nutrition advice there.
Sounds good. Yeah, stay tuned, guys.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.